Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Jesse. I'm here with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. And before I start my official intro, I want to note that the Phoenix School, you guys are like amazing dancers in the background during that groovy countdown. You guys rock. So way to go. And two is that this is a really special program for a number of reasons. Number one, it continues our epic National Wildlife Week celebrations in conjunction with the amazing folks at the Canadian Wildlife Federation. It has been such a wild ride the last 2 days. We got the chance to hang out with James Paget about bats. We did Tracy Etwell and pollinators the other day, a combined 1,700 kids for those. So you can check out all those programs like everything else we do on our YouTube channel. Lots to explore and discover, and stay tuned for the end too, where I give you like a bazillion resources to keep the learning going. But I'm particularly excited for today because today we are doing something that we were supposed to be doing on Monday. We were all set. We had David Seburn, who's going to come in. He's going to talk about turtles. And like no one was signing up. And we were like, what's going on? Because turtles is usually a really popular talk about. And you know what? It was the eclipse, that thing that only happens every once in a blue moon, and was really exciting. I hope you all had the chance to see it. So we moved the program to today, and it's gone over like a house on fire. We have like almost 1,000 kids from I think like 10 U.S. states in every Canadian province. So it's bedlam. It's so much fun. Welcome into all of you. Thank you all so much for being here. And before we dive in with David on this frantic, excited intro of mine, because I'm really keen on turtles, I will note we are going to have a Kahoot together. So between our talk and our Q&A, if you want to play along with that, 4 quick questions, test your understanding, have a little bit of fun, please do join us there. We'd love to have you take part. Now, as I said, David's here to talk to us today about turtles. His whole career has been spent in pursuit of saving turtles, seeking to educate the public about them, highlight the threats they face, and what we can do to save them. So I'm really excited because I love turtles. Some of my favorite nature experiences in my life have been with turtles in Canada's provincial and national parks. So you're in for such a treat learning from him today. Thank you so much for joining us, David, and welcome to the broadcast.
Hi, everyone. Happy Turtle Thursday, and let's talk about turtles.
Amazing.
So let me try to share my screen here. Hang on.
This is always the high stakes part. Will it play? Do we know? Keeps us on our toes. All right. We're getting there. When it pulls up full, I'll bring it up and we'll be good to go. I will note, everyone, too, I will be following up with a huge email with all sorts of stuff to keep the learning going when you're done, so stay tuned for that. And I'll put the Kahoot up on our YouTube channel in a minute. But, David, looks like you are good to go, man. Thank you so much, and take us away.
Excellent. All right. My name is David Seburn. I'm the freshwater turtle specialist with the Canadian Wildlife Federation. And today I'm going to be talking about turtles, obviously, and some of our work to conserve turtles. So I think turtles are pretty amazing, and they're amazing for a number of different reasons. But one of the coolest things about turtles is their shell. If we're to look inside, we would see that basically turtles have a suit of armor on their body. But instead of wearing a suit of armor, turtles actually are a suit of armor. They live it 24 hours a day. So how cool is that, to have your built-in suit of armor? In Canada, we've got 8 species of freshwater turtles. I'm going to quickly review those turtles. We have the painted turtle with a little bit of red on the edge of its shell. We have the mighty snapping turtle, the biggest turtle in Canada. The northern map turtle, which is typically only found in lakes and big rivers. The eastern musk turtle, which rarely leaves the water. The beautiful spotted turtle with bright yellow polka dots. And one of my favorites, the Blandings turtle, which has the bright yellow throat. We also have the spiny softshell and the wood turtle, which are both very rare in Canada. One thing that all these turtles have in common, unfortunately, is that they are species at risk. So in Canada, as I've said before, we've got 8 species of freshwater turtles, and all of them are listed by the federal government as being species at risk. So this makes turtles one of the most endangered groups of wildlife in Canada, and they definitely need our help. So we should ask ourselves, why are turtles so threatened? So first of all, as a group, turtles have been around for a long time. During the age of the dinosaurs, there were turtles. So it's kind of cool to think that turtles lived at the same time as T-Rex. The dinosaurs, we know, went extinct, but the turtles survived, showing they are pretty tough creatures. But our modern world is challenging them in new ways. Roads are a big threat for many of our turtles. They often like to move from one pond or one lake to another, and that may mean having to cross a busy road and risk being hit by a car or a truck. And raccoons and other nest predators, their populations have really gotten quite large in the last few decades. They like our cornfields, they like our compost piles, which means there's more raccoons, more skunks, more foxes, and that's great, but they also like to eat turtle eggs, and so that means it makes it much harder for turtle eggs to survive in this modern world. So I'm going to talk about some of our work to try to increase the number of eggs that hatch out every year to help turtle populations. So to start with, let's talk about turtle nesting season, which in Canada is typically the month of June, which is coming up fairly soon. When it's nesting time, the adult females leave the water and they look for a good place to lay their eggs. They want something that gets lots of sunshine, not too many plants growing there, and then the female will dig a hole in the ground, like she's doing in this photograph, lay the eggs, and then cover the eggs up with the soil. Now, from our human point of view, that's a pretty strange way to parent your kids, but it works for turtles. Those eggs are hidden from sight, but they're not necessarily hidden from all predators. So after the females lay her eggs and cover them up, she walks away from the nest and heads back into the water. And she will not go back to the nest. She does not guard the nest. She doesn't come back to check on the eggs or to check to see if the eggs hatched out. Once she's laid the eggs and covered them up, her job is done, and she's gone back to the water. So as I mentioned, those eggs are out of sight, and maybe they can't be found by some predators, but raccoons, skunks, foxes have a great sense of smell, and they can often find those nests, dig them up, and eat the eggs. So in many areas, 60%, 70%, even 80% or more of the eggs will be dug up and eaten by these predators. They're great food, but the turtles need some of those eggs to survive, to ensure the next generation is there. So luckily, there's a few things we can do to try to increase those nests surviving. The simplest thing is to install a nest protector like this. It's got a wooden frame with a wire mesh on top. So the wire mesh allows the sun to get through and hit the ground and warm it up. And it allows the rain to get through the mesh and keep the ground moist whenever it rains. But the wooden frame and the mesh keep the predators out. And in this case, you can see Chris is hammering in some spikes in the four corners of the nest protector. And there happen to be some big rocks nearby. So we put rocks on the corners to keep the raccoons from getting in. But the important part of a nest protector is having an exit hole. And this means that when the eggs hatch, the hatchlings dig their way to the surface, they can get out of the nest protector by exiting from these small holes, but the holes are small enough to keep out raccoons and other predators. So these protectors work pretty good, but there's some places we just can't use them. And in those cases, we actually collect the eggs and incubate them. But of course, the hard part is actually finding the turtle laying her eggs. Sometimes they're there for a few hours and they make a big mess and it's easy to find, but sometimes it's very difficult to find that nest. But once we do, we dig up the nest. We start off with a hand trowel, and then once we get down an inch or so, we're going to switch to just using our fingers to make sure we don't break any of the eggs, and keep digging until we find the eggs buried in the ground. Then we can take the eggs out one by one, put them in a container to make sure they don't bounce around. And we always number every single egg to keep track of them. Then we bring those nests or clutches of eggs back to our facility, and we've got incubators set up to keep the eggs the right temperature. So the incubators are kind of like a big box. They've got a heater and a fan to mix the air. And the important part is the thermostat here on top of the incubator, which maintains a certain temperature in the incubator. It's a lot like the thermostat you may have in your house or your apartment. And you can set it to whatever temperature you want to make sure it's a good warm temperature for the eggs to develop. One of the many cool things about turtles is that for most species, not all, but most of them, the temperature of the eggs determines whether the hatchling is going to be a boy or a girl. In general, cooler temperatures produce more boys, and warmer temperatures produce more girls. And after about 2 months in the incubators, those eggs start to crack open and hatchlings start to pop out. This is a hatchling snapping turtle on its very first day outside of the egg. This is its first time to see the world. It's looking around to get a sense of what this big world is going to be like. Once 1 or 2 eggs in a nest start to hatch, a whole bunch of eggs will start to hatch afterwards. This is a nest of Blanding's turtles, and we would take them out of this bin, give them a bit of bath to wash off the soil in there, and then transfer them to a different bin that's got water in it and some aquarium plants to give the hatchlings some places to hide and feel a bit more comfortable in. This is an adorable Blanding's turtle hatchling. You can see even at this age, it has the bright yellow throat from day 1. And you'll also notice it has this yellow oval on its belly. You can think of that as kind of like being the turtle's belly button. So inside the egg, there's the yolk and there's the embryo developing, and the embryo is connected to the yolk via an umbilical cord through its little belly button like this. Once it hatches out, the yolk has been absorbed. It doesn't need the belly button anymore. And over the next few weeks, the shell will close up. The belly button will disappear. So unlike us, turtles only have a belly button for a few weeks, but it's vitally important in their development. Once an entire nest of eggs is hatched out, we weigh and measure all the hatchlings and examine them to make sure they're in good shape. And then it's time to release those hatchlings back into the wild. So this is a northern map turtle hatchling, and this is a bay of a big lake where we're going to release a whole bunch of hatchlings back into the water. So over the last few years, we've released over 4,000 hatchlings back into the wild. And this gives turtle populations an amazing boost. And hopefully there'll be more turtles in the future for all of us to enjoy and have their place in nature. So in this photograph, there's the northern map turtle again in the top right-hand corner, and the Blanding's turtle in the bottom left with its bright yellow throat. So that's a few ways that we're trying to give turtles a helping hand. And now I'm going to talk about a few ways you can help turtles, because we can all help turtles if we're lucky enough to have turtles in our area. And I mentioned before that being hit by cars is a big threat for turtles. So if you're driving with your family on roads, particularly in May and June, when turtles are on the move, you can watch for turtles on the road. And if it's safe to do so, you can pull over and with an adult's help, move the turtle off the road. It's always important to move the turtle and the direction it's heading because it knows where it wants to go. And you can see in the photograph how Hannah is holding onto the turtle very safely. She's got a hand on each side of the turtle. We sometimes call it the hamburger hold. It's like you're holding a big hamburger, and that's the safest way to pick up most turtles. Snapping turtles are different. I'm sure you know snapping turtles can be a bit grumpy, and they will bite, so you can't pick them up like this. You would get bitten. We have put together a short video on how to move snapping turtles off the road. And if you want to check that out sometime, you can find it on our website, which is at helptheturtles.ca. And if you're really lucky, you may have turtles that nest in your backyard if you live near a lake or a river, or perhaps you've got a cottage someplace and you've got turtles that nest there. Or maybe your school is near a lake and your school could have a project to protect turtle nests. So we've got a flyer we've put together on how to build a turtle nest protector, and you can download that PDF from our website as well. So that's helptheturtles.ca. So you can make turtle nest protectors and help the turtles. Last but not least, I want to thank all the people who've helped in this project over the last many years. Certainly could not have done it by myself. It's always a group activity. And with that, I'm happy to take as many questions as you've got time for.
David, that was spectacular. Thank you so much, man. And if you want to come out of screen share so you can see us again, have a bit of a conversation. You're inspiring a lot of group folks, but we already have classes that have already helped turtles cross roads, which is very exciting. So Miss Quirk's group, way to go to you guys for being conservation champions already. And I'm so excited for everyone's questions. Our live classes and our YouTube classes, we're going to come to all of you in just a few minutes with our Q&A. But first, as I promised at the beginning, we're going to test your understanding, have a little bit of fun with our Kahoot together. So a lot of you are already in on this. If you're new to Kahoot, the faster you answer, the more points you get. And what you win is David and I's everlasting respect. So we hope you were paying attention. Don't worry if you don't want to play or if you get anything wrong. The joy is in just taking part. And then we're going to go to our Phoenix School friends for our Q&A first in just a minute. There's already so many great questions coming in, which is fantastic too. All right, we're going to dive in and get underway with this. Let's do it, everybody. Here we go. All right. Ooh, that was a rapid fire presentation. We have so much time for Q&A. David, you come back anytime. All right, right at the beginning of David's presentation, he said this. How many kinds of freshwater turtle, do we have in Canada? Is it one kind of turtle, 8, 15, or 900? Are there just turtle species everywhere? Might not be 900. Might not be one. We had a few. We got a chance to meet them all at the beginning. I've got to say, Blandings, which is the one in this picture, I never knew it existed until we did a program with it at the zoo, and they're one of my favorite now, too. They're very cool with the yellow throat. And most of you got this right. Look at that. That's fantastic. 26 of you were on the ball with 8. Red New is in our lead. Let's head to question 2. All right. Multi-select. So there's going to be more than one answer. It might be all 4. We don't know. We'll find out. What are some threats to turtles in Canada? Cars being run over on a road, habitat loss, poaching for the pet trade or taking them, or not enough ninja training? Might be several of these. Might not be one of them. As a heads up in advance. As much fun as the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are, they do not relate to our program today. So cars is the big one we talked about. Fantastic. Cars are a huge threat to not just turtles, but a lot of creatures around Canada and the world for that matter. Habitat loss affects all wildlife, and taking them as pets is a big deal as well. On the Canadian Wildlife Federation site, you can check out some of the threats to turtles and more of the things that we're doing about them to sort of flesh out what we heard in today's presentation. All right, that completely threw off our leaderboard. Balance Crane takes our lead. All right, we've got some fun ones now. These are both true or false. Some turtles can hibernate under the water, breathing through their skin. There might be something related to this question, David, that I can pretty much guarantee we're going to get a question during our Q&A about breathing through the skin, maybe a particular part of the skin. Is this true or false? What do we think? 50. There's 60 of you now in the Kahoot. This is crazy. Way to go. The answer is true. Yes. It sounds so weird. David, I actually found a blog post from you Talking about turtles being under the ice, breathing through their skin. It's so weird. We can't do it. Don't try this at home, kids. But turtles have that superpower. So very, very cool. All right. Red New retakes the lead. Oh my gosh, that doesn't happen in ages. All right, finally, true or false? Painted turtles can survive being frozen. Another, don't try this at home, kids. You cannot survive being frozen. If you go into the fridge or you stay outside in a negative 30 day, that won't end well unless you have the best possible gear. But can turtles? Some turtles, maybe, maybe not. What do we think? All right, I'm going to say this in advance. So, most of you thought false. It is true, and I'm going to send you all a video when we're done this program from one of the major BBC series in the last few years of turtles literally covered in ice. The ice thaws, and they wake up. It's like black magic. It's one of the coolest things ever. All right, Amazing Owls in third, Balanced Quails in second, and first for all the marbles, David. Let us know who you are if you are any. Red New takes the win. Way to go, everybody. Okay. Well, that was fun. Thank you for playing along, everyone. That was magnificent. And we're going to dive in with questions. So our Phoenix School friends, welcome in and stay there. If you want to kick us off and flick on your mic, we'll come on in. Miss Coburn, our Rockwood crew, you guys are up next. And YouTubers, please do chime in with as many as you can over our next 20 minutes together. Phoenix School, hello. Come on in. Hello. Unmute, and then we'll dive in with the question. It wants to work. It's thinking about it.
And
Hey.
My name is Ezra, and I'm in third grade. And how did you see the turtles?
How did he see them? How did he find them?
Yep.
Yeah. How do you find them, David?
Oh, great question. It's really hard to find nesting turtles. And so sometimes we go out at night looking for them nesting. And now that we've been doing this for a few years, we have a big network of people around Ottawa, which is where we are. And they call us and we get emails and phone calls every day saying, I had a snapping turtle nest in my backyard last night. Can you help me? Or I had a Blandings turtle nest in our compost pile. Can you help me? And that makes it much easier for us to find the nests and then collect the eggs and incubate them.
Such a great testament to the power of citizen science. And this is something that we're seeing in a lot of things around the world now. Birds, pollinators, we talked about the other day, bats. So increasingly, as citizens, you can get involved. If you see these animals out in the wild, you can let the Canadian Wildlife Federation know. You can let local authorities know. I saw a turtle laying an egg or laying a nest once, and there was about 20 people sort of standing around far enough, respectful distance, leave the turtle alone. But to witness that is one of the most special things you can see in nature. So I love that question. Thanks, guys. Miss Coburn, our Dalewood School friends, if you unmute your mic, I know you shared something in the chat, but I can take it live if you'd like and take us away.
Hey, I know it's sun's kind of behind me here. Anyway, so we live in Hamilton, Ontario. We're by McMaster University, and on Coots Road, they've actually built turtle blockage, like with fences and stuff along the road. But we'd like to take it further and ask. Okay, we're asking why in some areas of the world, such as Hawaii, when a turtle approaches you on a beach, why is it the law that you must move away from them?
Interesting.
Another great question. So typically, especially for the sea turtles, when they're on land, they're only on land for one reason, and that's to lay eggs. So the female is on land, they're massive turtles, and they don't feel very comfortable on land. And so despite the fact that they're big, they're going to feel threatened by people. So if there's people on the beach, they're more apt to go back out into the sea and not lay their eggs and come back another time. So you can imagine that kind of harassment is just difficult for the turtles to deal with. So if people stay back a good, safe distance, the turtle doesn't feel as threatened, and she's more apt to lay her eggs. And it's quite likely that whoever's there can get to see her watch her lay the eggs, which is pretty special as well. So that's why we don't like to get too close to them when they're on land for the sea turtles. But the same thing is true for our freshwater turtles. As Jesse mentioned, if a turtle is nesting and you see it nesting, it's fine to watch, but you don't want to get right up close to the turtle because that's going to scare it and it might not finish laying its eggs, and that's dangerous for it. So keep a safe distance and you can enjoy the spectacle of nature.
I'm so glad we got this question, but this is true of a lot of wildlife. I know Toronto, where I used to live, has a bald eagle nesting there right now, and it's been really noteworthy that people have to stay away from that. Make sure it has the space it needs to feel comfortable, that it's not in danger. Remember, to most animals, we look like a giant monster coming up. I mean, we're a very big animal in the scheme of things, and so just like you might not want to have a picnic if there was a rhinoceros standing over your shoulder, some of these animals don't want to breed if there's people standing right there as well. We're going to head to our YouTube friends. There's so many of you on YouTube. This is amazing. Miss Wright's class, welcome in. And Whitby, we've got Miss Horsewood's class, the Dundas Turtle Watch. Miss Dennison, Holliston, Massachusetts. Miss Cork, geez, Miss Mulligan. There's so many of you. It's crazy. Welcome in, everybody. So we're going to take a few questions from there. Let's see. Oh, Miss Cork's class wants to know, how do you decide what temperature to put the incubators at?
Ooh, another really good question. So, as I mentioned, the temperature determines the percentage of boys and girls in the nest, and we know exactly kind of where that the key temperature is. Above it, mainly girls; below it, mainly boys. But if we pick that in between temperature, which is kind of like the Goldilocks zone, we get roughly half males and half females, and that's what we want to aim for, because in the wild, populations are going to be roughly equal numbers of males and females. But if we increase the temperature a bit, we would be able to get more girls produced and therefore more females down the road if we wanted to do that.
Yeah, fascinating question. We were just, my wife and I were just watching Planet Earth 3, and they're out on a really remote Pacific island, and it's the same deal. We're finding with climate change, the temperatures are getting a little hotter, so it's really skewing these gender ratios, where like 99% of the turtles are one gender. That's problematic for the species, and so they're trying to find ways of bringing this idea that we've had in incubators for years into the wild, to set up incubators in really remote locations. It's going to be a big challenge for turtle conservation, so I'm really glad we got that question. Thanks, Ms. Cork. All right. Alicia in Miss Dennison's group wants to know, how many species of turtle are there in the world? No pressure.
I can't give you an exact number, but it's around 300 species. And what's kind of interesting is that 300 is a big number, but when you compare it to other kinds of reptiles, it's actually a very small number. So offhand, there's more than 3,000 species of snakes. 3,000 species of snakes, so 10 times as many kinds of snakes as turtles. And when you look at lizards, another group of reptiles, they also have thousands of species of lizards. So for some reason, turtles just aren't as diverse as snakes and lizards. And we're not quite sure why, but that just means every species is special.
David, it's rare. Like I'm an evolutionary biologist and ecologist by background, so every time there's something that really throws me off, I find it fascinating. But I had no idea that was true about turtles. We've talked about species in the last few days with pollinators and bats. I mean, for there to be that few is really unexpected. So thank you for that question, Ms. Dennison's class. That was fantastic. All right. Miss Mulligan's group, they want to know another question that might be a little tricky, but I love it. What's the total turtle population in Canada? How many turtles do we got, David?
That I certainly can't answer. So all we can say is where turtles are the most common. Yeah. And so Ontario has the most species. It has all 8 species of turtles. Quebec has 6 or 7 of those species, but only typically in the very southern part of the province. And then the Maritimes, they have the common species, painted turtle, snapping turtle, and some Blanding's turtle populations, and wood turtles in some spots. And as we go on the prairies to the west, typically we're just seeing painted turtles and sometimes snapping turtles, but mainly just the very, very southern part of Manitoba and Saskatchewan and Alberta. It's very, very hard to find turtles there. And then once we get all the way out to BC, they only have painted turtles. They're a bit more widespread, typically found around the Vancouver and the southeast coast and on Vancouver Island as well. But total numbers, I don't know. Tens of thousands at least.
I'm so glad you mentioned the diversity and the different species there. So painted turtles are the ones I've seen the most, but I will stress for our audience, if you ever get the chance to see a snapping turtle, it's like going back in time. You might as well be seeing a dinosaur. It's one of the freakiest creatures on Earth. I love them. They're amazing. Get that chance. Head out and find. You thought the eclipse was cool. Go see a snapping turtle. It'll change your life.
Yeah, if I can just add about snapping turtles. One of the things that's so cool about snappers, if you get a chance to see one up close, is to look at their tail. They've got a very long tail, and they actually have spikes on their tail. The tail looks just like a dinosaur's tail.
I am pulling this up, and I'll get a picture in between our next questions that we can show a snapping turtle tail, because they are super, super cool. We're going to head to our Phoenix School friend. If you have another question for us live, we got another time for 5 or so questions. So come on in and take us away, guys. Everyone's got a question. Amazing. Got to choose which one. Let the teachers make that decision.
All right. So, do any turtles cause any beneficial environmental benefits?
Ooh.
Or, yeah, like whether they're in the water or on land?
Fantastic question.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Wow, where to start? So let's go back to the snapping turtle. And I think snapping turtles are important for a few reasons. One is that they're not great hunters and predators in terms of finding food for themselves, but what they do tend to eat a lot of is dead fish. So in the springtime, sometimes a lake may have gone very, very cold or frozen very deep, and some of the fish will die. And the snapping turtle says, great, I love dead and rotting fish, and they'll eat those fish. So if we didn't have these big, basically garbage men of the wetlands, you'd have a bunch of dead fish floating around your lake, which I don't think anyone really likes. So that's a valuable service that they provide. And as I mentioned, obviously a lot of turtle eggs get eaten by predators. So while it's okay if some eggs get eaten, we want to protect a lot of them. Those eggs that do get eaten are valuable resources for predators. And so you can think of turtles living in wetlands, but then moving on to land to lay their eggs. And they're kind of transferring nutrients from wetlands onto the land. And those nutrients are then feeding raccoons and skunks and foxes and things like that. So that's another way that they're involved in the ecosystem. And I think also for some wetlands, especially in southern Canada, where we find more turtles, so maybe the Toronto area or Hamilton, if you go to some of these big wetlands on a good sunny day in the springtime, you might see 100 or 200 painted turtles basking in a big wetland. And so you can just think of all the energy that those turtles have absorbed from that wetland. We call it biomass, which is all the weight of all the living things. And the biomass of turtles in a wetland is huge. All these, the bones and the shells, so all the calcium that they've taken in from the wetlands. That's a massive effect on the wetlands. And those turtles are eating, well, dead fish if it's snapping turtles, but all the other turtles are typically eating insects or water, plants, and they're having a big effect on the insect community, the invertebrate community, and the plant community of those wetlands. And I think we're just beginning to understand how important turtles can be, especially when they're there in large numbers.
David, that was a beautiful and thoughtful answer. Thank you so much for doing a deep dive in on that. And one thing that we've been harping on in the entire Canadian Wildlife Federation series is the idea that really all wildlife is valuable. There are studied species and groups that we have yet to study in any great detail, or there's still a lot of work to be done. But I've always loved the analogy, and you're starting to hear this more and more, that, you know, just like on a plane, if you take out one screw from the plane's probably fine. If you take out 2 screws from the plane's probably fine. If you keep taking out screws, which represent species in an ecosystem, you can really have a hugely negative impact in ways that we, again, sometimes see long after that impact is starting to be felt. Sort of a classic example of this is sea otters off Canada and the U.S. coast, their impact on sea urchins and kelp forest and the fisheries there. And this is something that, again, we want to just protect all species. We want to make sure that the habitats that we have for species are as lush, as natural as possible, that we're not having a really negative impact on a lot of animals, because the world is richer for the wildlife that we have. And you explained a lot of great reasons why that would be the case, David. So thank you for that. I'm going to very briefly bring up a snapping turtle tail picture because they're super cool. I can only make them so big really quick, but you can see they're very dinosaurian, and we've got these big spikes on the back of the tail. Are just a wild and amazing creature. So thank you for that question again, everybody. All right, we've got one from Nicole coming in. Does seaweed affect turtles in any way? So we can take this in a variety of ways. I know a lot of species we've talked about in our broadcast are being sort of choked out by algae growth in a lot of wetlands and sort of water habitat. Do we find anything like that with turtles? Does anything in the water affect them in a negative way?
It certainly can, and we're still learning more about that as well. So seaweed is typically in the ocean, so that wouldn't affect freshwater turtles per se. But one exotic species of plant we've got in Canada is something called Phragmites. It's a very, very tall grass, and it can grow about 2 meters tall, so it's huge. And we've seen in some wetlands, particularly in southwestern Ontario, the whole wetland gets taken over by the Phragmites, and it basically just chokes out the wetland. And if you were trying to walk through it, it's almost impossible. And so that must be having all kinds of effects on the wildlife in the wetlands. The stands, the grass stems are very, very thick, and they might be only a few inches apart. So it's like going through little bars that are somewhat flexible. It's going to shade the wetland, which means the water is cooler. And of course, turtles love to bask and absorb that heat. So some of these invasive species in the wetlands are going to have huge effects on all kinds of wildlife. And we're just beginning to understand what those effects are going to be and trying to figure out ways to control some of these exotic species like Phragmites.
David, we in these broadcasts get the chance to bring on people that are the world experts. We get to bring on educators that are fantastic. Sometimes those don't coincide, and in you it does, and it shows in every answer that you give. So thank you so much for your expertise and passion today. This has been so much fun for me personally. Folks, we've got time for 3 more questions. What I'm going to note again is that we have so many education resources coming your way. If you want to find out about National Wildlife Week, if you want to check out the education resources, if you want to learn about amazing creatures across Canada, all that will be in your inbox when we're done, alongside a survey that we'd love you to fill out, highlighting what you thought about today's broadcast and what you learned, what you've taken away. That would be spectacular. But we're going to wrap up with 3 quick questions before we go together. Miss Coburn, I'm going to come back to you guys live. I'm going to take one from our YouTube friends, and then Phoenix School will wrap up with you in just a minute. But Dalewood, if you've got a question for us, I know you've been sharing some in the chat. Come on in. Hey.
Hi, David. We were just wondering, we're looking at, we're a remote class and our students work from home, but we're looking at careers and the pathway that you took to get where you are. Like, what would be, my students are going into high school next year, so what would be some courses or some things they might want to consider, maybe volunteer jobs to get into wildlife?
Nice.
Excellent question. There certainly are lots of jobs in the wildlife field. There's lots of people looking for those kinds of jobs. So in high school, I took a lot of science courses and math courses, but across the board, but it's always important to keep those science courses going. And then in university, I took a wide variety of courses, focusing on ecology mainly. And I eventually went off and got a master's degree in ecology as well. But there's different paths forward, but science in high school is important, and in university. In terms of volunteering, I think there's lots of possibilities. A number of cities will have field naturalist clubs, and they often do outings, workshops where you can learn about birds or insects or even turtles, and go on field hikes with people. Some cities actually have a junior naturalist club, which is great for younger folks. You can meet other kids who are wildly enthusiastic about nature, because not all kids are, only some are. And in terms of volunteering, there's also a number of wildlife rehab centers across Canada, and some of them will take in volunteers, especially in the summertime. They need people to do things like cleaning out cages, handling wildlife. And sometimes they can take in students who are in high school as volunteers. We have a few volunteers at the Canadian Wildlife Federation here in Ottawa, but only a very, very few, because there's only so many we can take on. It's worth talking to your local wildlife officers or museums and finding out what the possibilities are in your area. You just have to keep thinking of possibilities, whether it's a conservation authority, if you're in Ontario, or a museum, like I said, wildlife rehab centers, or places like that.
What I love about this answer is that I applied for like all of those jobs and volunteer gigs when I was younger. So about the age of your students, I did this shtick before. The museum was big to talk about biodiversity, get involved there, educate kids. There were lots of opportunities. So pretty much wherever you are in Canada, the US, beyond, there's something that you can find. And again, the people are like David, like they're endlessly happy to share their knowledge and get you involved. It's a really welcoming community in the animal space. So please do apply. And that's a fantastic question, Ms. Coburn. Phoenix School, I see that you guys have to go pretty soon, so I'm going to come to you first for a question, and then we'll take one from YouTube, and then we'll wrap up. So come on in and unmute your mic for a final question with us. Hey, guys. So many of you. I love your classroom. Every time I get to see it, it's amazing. Lucky you.
So my name is Jerry. I'm in first grade, and I'm wondering what's the least place on this planet that does not have that many turtles besides Antarctica and the North Pole?
Nice question.
Oh, that's a hard question. What place has the fewest turtles aside from Antarctica? Well, Antarctica definitely doesn't have any turtles, so that's a good, clear answer. I would say probably it's going to be some of our hottest and driest deserts. So in the American Southwest, there is the desert tortoise, which occurs there. But in some places it's so hot and dry, like the Sahara Desert, I don't think has any turtles or tortoises. And tortoises are just a kind of turtle adapted for dry land. So I think I would say the hottest and driest spot you could find.
Yeah, that was an amazing question, by the way. So thank you so much, especially for a first grader. Way to go, man. David, this has been so much fun. Time flies when you're having fun in these broadcasts. I want to note again, we're going to get you a whole bunch of resources, including for our Backyard Bio program coming up soon, where you can go and explore your local wetlands areas, try and find wildlife of your own, including turtles. Bonus points if you find some turtles. But yeah, check out the rest of our series. You've got 2 more programs, one later today in a little over an hour, and one tomorrow to wrap up at 12:30 Eastern Time. So many more resources to come your way. So please do check those out in the email in a minute. But David, before we bring in our classes to say thank you and farewell, is there any final message you want to leave us on about turtles today?
Well, thanks for showing up today. And if you want to find out more about turtles, as Jesse mentioned, please check out our website, helptheturtles.ca. We've got profiles of all the species of turtles found in Canada, the various conservation threats they face, and more about the different kinds of work we're doing with turtles.
David, couldn't leave with a better message than that. Helptheturtles.ca, everyone. And if you're our U.S. audience today, you want to find out how to help turtles, please do reach out. I can find you some resources wherever you are around the world. We love your passion, everybody. So thank you all so much for joining. And David, what we do to wrap up every broadcast, I'm going to bring in our class to say thank you and farewell. If you're at home, if you're an individual teacher, if you're on YouTube, you can scream and yell as well. But Phoenix School, thank you guys so much for being a great audience today. Have a wonderful day.